you're about to do will be perilous. Very perilous.
For centuries, layers of myth and legend have shrouded the subject of pirates, especially within its golden era.
There's 3 eras in the golden age of piracy: the buccaneering period, the pirate round, and the one we'll be focusing on, the post-Spanish succession period.
But you're still the best crew a captain could wish for.
Breaking this down even further, we're focusing on 3 subcategories.
Key individuals, the pirate code, and myths and superstitions.
This is...
Let's go plundering!
We went to the public to ask them their thoughts.
Can you name a real pirate?
Blackbeard.
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 Blackbeard?
We couldn't exactly make a documentary on pirates without talking about Blackbeard, but who really was he?
In terms of the image of piracy, I think it has to be Edward Teach or Blackbeard.
We interviewed some experts to find out more.
So I think, for me, the most influential pirate of the period and, going forward would be Edward Teach or Blackbeard.
Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard or lesser known as Edward Tatch, was one of the most infamous pirates in history. However, not a lot is known about Blackbeard.
Robert E. Lee's book about Blackbeard is kind of like the gold standard for information on Blackbeard, and it's very vague and full of errors.
He was believed to be born in Bristol in 1680 and died in North Carolina on the 22nd of November 1718.
For me, certainly the holding Charleston hostage for nearly a week in the spring of 1718 was his most important moment. I mean, that was an enormous deal. It definitely kind of sparked the beginning of the end of the golden age of piracy. At that point, Charleston was the wealthiest city in what would become the Americas. And to pull that off with 4 ships and nearly 500 pirate crew, I mean, that was kind of the crescendo, the high tide almost of the golden age of piracy.
It is most commonly believed that he was a sailor during the War of the Spanish Succession.
Most pirates were sailors, often in the navy, sometimes in merchant ships, sometimes in privateers. So most of them had some kind of military experience before they became pirates. And indeed, the moment when Blackbeard and others kind of go into piracy immediately after the War of the Spanish Succession, it's not immediately clear they actually think what they're doing is pirates. The kind of international diplomacy at this time is very complicated.
Ooh, now there's an idea. I haven't done that yet. Haven't died yet, have I?
I think probably his death is actually so dramatic. He's also negotiating with colonial governors in the Americas, so he sort of has this relationship with the governor of North Carolina. Actually, he accepts a pardon and then goes back to sea, where he's been hunted down by some Navy crews, although actually the ships they're in are hired by colonial officials. So it's this collaboration between the colonial authorities and the Navy. But the governor in Virginia is very concerned about the pirate problem, so he sends out this expedition. And Blackbeard is chased down by these Navy officers, and apparently this very dramatic battle. He's decapitated when he's about to kill a Navy captain. And very quickly, all of these stories about that battle are circulating in newspapers. The Navy captain himself clearly has a good PR approach, because he sails back into Virginia with Blackbeard's head hanging from the front of his ship, and he writes his own account of the battle, which is then circulated.
I think, honestly, for Hornigold, the reason that he is still remembered today and celebrated today is his link to Blackbeard, the fact that he kind of cultivated and brought Blackbeard up.
Benjamin Hornigold was best known for his role in the founding of the Republic of Pirates. The Republic of Pirates was founded in 1706 by Hornigold and his associate Henry Jennings, and was informally governed by them until 1716 when Blackbeard took over.
So there's a lot of debate about the idea of the Republic of Pirates, because I don't know that pirates would have called it a republic themselves.
Hornigold stepped down as co-leader after Henry Jennings' capture, and due to the fact that he was facing concerns from his own crew.
So much kind of government in Nassau of pirates certainly made piracy a much grander scale.
The Republic of Pirates ran until 1718 when it was dissipated after the Act of Grace was enacted and officers were sent to capture any remaining pirates.
Woodes Rogers captures the Bahamas again in 1717, 1718. That really changes the episodes of piracy that's going on at this time because pirates no longer have that settled base. So I think it tells us more about anxieties at the time amongst the political elite than it does about what the pirates were themselves doing.
Those are the options. Huh? Or we could just make some soup.
Hornigold is one of the figures involved in the so-called Republic and indeed seems to have declared himself governor of Nassau at one point, although I don't think he's the first person to do that. So he may have ousted somebody else. And so I think he becomes famous as an identifiable leader of this quite chaotic group. I think Hornigold is probably in charge of the largest crew, and he's maybe the most intimidating figure, and he's not controlling other pirates, but he maybe has the most influential voice. Interestingly, when Woodes Rogers captures Nassau, Hornigold actually then allies with Woodes Rogers and he takes a pardon and he becomes a pirate hunter because Woodes Rogers actually sends these glowing reports saying, oh, well, Hornigold is doing such good things fighting against pirates. The fact that he's a poacher turned gamekeeper, I think, might add something to the legend.
Can I name a real pirate? I think Anne Bonny.
Anne Bonny was one of very few recorded female pirates. However, there were believed to be many more.
I think Anne Bonny and Mary Read are fascinating because they're so distinctive and because the stories about them are probably almost entirely fictional.
After marrying small-time pirate James Bonny, the pair moved to the Republic of Pirates, where Anne later met John Rackham, better known as Calico Jack.
Anne Bonny is portrayed as very libertine, very much kind of going around. She has a husband her father disapproves of. She leaves him for Calico Jack. She may have been kind of already having affairs before she meets Calico Jack. She's supposed to have left a baby in Cuba at one point so that she can carry on her piratical career. None of that has any corroborating evidence. Think about the baby in Cuba is practically impossible based along the rest of the timelines.
She later left her husband in order to sail with Calico Jack, but not after he put up a fight. James threatened to kill Calico Jack before they ultimately got divorced. Whilst on board, she met Mary Read, another undercover female pirate. Read and Jack were the only people aware that Bonny was actually a female.
Despite her arrest and death sentence, Anne Bonny didn't die at the hands of the government. Instead, she disappeared on around the 28th of November 1720. There are many theories around her disappearance.
There are two, I think, prevailing theories about Anne Bonny. The first
story in Charleston, and I guess it's as good as any story, is that Anne Bonny was in prison. Her father, who was here in Charleston, had a plantation outside the city, but he also owned and operated a tavern inside the city of Charleston. Once word had reached Charleston, probably from a merchant vessel trading in between Jamaica and Charleston, he received word that Anne Bonny was imprisoned, and he arranged to pay money to have her released. She came back to Charleston and lived and worked potentially in the tavern that her father owned or lived at his plantation until she died.
I'm not convinced by that simply because I don't believe the general history. So I don't really believe the sections about her childhood, about her father. We have no corroborating evidence of who her family was. The other theory is that she was from a Bonny family who lived in Jamaica because there are records of Bonnies living in Jamaica. And there's a record of a burial of an Anne Bonny that was discovered by a historian working in Jamaica about 10 years after the trial. But it seems more likely to me that she has remained in Jamaica and dies some while later, although we don't really know anything about what happened to her.
If you were given the chance to become a pirate, would you do it?
In this economy, yeah.
No, I'm a lawful creature.
No, I wouldn't. Seems like they all have just poor health.
I wouldn't become a pirate. I'd die of scurvy.
No, I wouldn't want to. I'd be giving up everything.
Probably wouldn't. To be honest, scurvy does not sound appealing. I would probably die within 24 hours of becoming a pirate.
The Pirate Code was a distinct set of rules set by a captain that a crew would have to follow in order to stay aboard. These rules differed from captain to captain, but are often along similar lines.
These base rules were: no fighting on the ship,
no women aboard the ship,
no gambling with dice or cards on the ship,
all weapons and pirates to be ready for battle at all times.
every pirate gets equal amounts of loot captured.
Every pirate gets an equal amount of food and drink.
Every pirate gets to vote on where the ship goes and what the crew does.
Every pirate does what the captain or quartermaster says. What's your favourite piece of pirate-based media?
Escape from Monkey Island, a computer game from the early 90s.
I actually like pirate metal.
I think what comes to mind first would be Pirates of the Caribbean.
It's probably Our Flag Means Death.
Our flag means death.
Captain Metalbeard from the Lego Movie.
If I asked you to think of a pirate-based superstition, your first thought would probably be the black spot, right? Well, did you know that that was entirely made up by Robert Louis Stevenson for his book Treasure Island? Ghost ships... Ah! No, not that kind of ghost. Well, it could be that kind of ghost. In this case, I'm talking about ghost ships such as the Flying Dutchman or the Mary Celeste.
Is the Flying Dutchman, which is a story of a ship sailing round Cape Horn, and supposedly the captain curses heaven because a storm is stopping him and he refuses to turn. He keeps going, and because of those curses he is blaspheming, and so he is punished by being forced to sail the seas forever. But I don't think there's much evidence of that story around at the time of the pirates. I think that's a later story.
There are two categories to ghost ships. There was a ship that would carry on sailing despite having no living crew, or there was the ghostly myth of a flying ship that pirates would record seeing.
I don't recall having seen many stories about ghost ships. There are sometimes in ballads stories about ghosts of sailors who've died at sea. Often a ghost might turn up to their loved one who they've left behind on shore and who's obviously very, very sad. And
I mean, I imagine pirates, just like sailors in general at that period, were very superstitious people. So yes, I imagine that they did believe in it. There's still like a lot of superstitions and old beliefs that float around even today. Was it credible for them to believe in it? I don't know, but I'm sure that they did believe in it.
So you do sometimes get these ideas of ghosts, but it's an individual ghost. It's not a whole ship of ghosts. So there is some evidence of these superstitions, these ideas, these beliefs about the maritime environment. But I think the idea of the ghost ship as a kind of identifiable cultural idea comes along a bit later than the period we're talking about here.
The Kraken, one of pirates' most notorious foes, or just a big octopus. First recorded in 1700 by Francesco Negri and spotted mostly in the waters between Norway and Iceland, there is still much uncertainty surrounding the great beast. It was first given the name Kraken by Victor Hugo in his novel Toilers of the Sea.
Sounds like it was right around the early 1700s when the idea of the Kraken first came to be born into like literature and things like that. This creature that became known as the Kraken. I don't think he called it the Kraken, but something close. So he was kind of like, I think, a travel journalist, almost kind of writer, and I guess had some experience with some kind of creature that, maybe he embellished and added a couple of extra heads to and made it a little bit more terrifying than it actually was.
The Kraken, I think, in various guises appears in biblical literature and in those sorts of contexts. And this was a hugely religious society, and people were immersed either through reading themselves, but also through going to church, which was a social, regular activity. Even some buccaneers and French flibustiers are apparently having religious services on their ships and things like this. So even if pirates themselves weren't necessarily devout, they were familiar with this sort of culture. I think it fits in with that sort of culture, where you have biblical references to whales in the story of Jonah, and that turns up a lot in contemporary culture. You have references to the Kraken, to sea monsters. And so they're kind of gathering this information, and certainly some of these unusual sea creatures might well have inspired ideas and stories. Most of the ones we associate with the Kraken live so deep down and actually can't survive at the surface. So it's very unlikely that sailors would have encountered a living one. And given the kind of level of knowledge at the time, it's not surprising that with the combination of the sort of biblical, cultural, religious background and the experience of this maritime environment, that maybe some of these ideas are circulating.
Some pirates believed mermaids to be good luck. However, many pirates were quite superstitious about mermaids, believing that they had mystical powers which could curse them and doom the ship. However, those that believed that they were good luck would often carve mermaids into their ships in order to appease the sea, which would bring good weather and calm waters, as well as finding a safe way back to land.
I have found very few references to mermaids. There was a tavern in Port Royal in Jamaica called the Mermaid, I believe. So there are some references to mermaids, but in a somewhat more playful way. I did check William Dampier, and he doesn't mention mermaids or more creatures at all, but that might be part of him trying to present himself in a more sort of scientific fashion. So I think there are possibly people who do believe in mermaids at this time, but it's not a well-documented phenomenon. But you do also, in addition to the biblical context, you also have a lot of classical culture. So you have sirens from the various Greek myths, and I think mermaids turn up in Greek myths as well. And although, again, that doesn't mean that people genuinely believe in these things, it means that they are present in the culture. So mermaids do get mentioned in ballads, sirens are mentioned. And it's interesting how often European travelers try to make sense of things through this classical heritage. But again, I don't think there are any pirates who are sitting there worrying about mermaids or worrying about sirens, but they would have known about those things. And it's not impossible that some of them might have sort of considered it to be feasible, or that they might have thought about some of these kind of Greek myths and Roman myths and tried to connect them with their own experiences of the maritime world in the 18th century as well.
The 1724 book, A General History of the Pirates by Charles Johnson, is generally considered the book that influenced our modern view on pirates.
Yes, I think if I have to answer it very simply, I think General History of the Pirates, which has its 300th anniversary in May this year, is the most important book about pirates ever written.
In many ways, yes. And some of that's kind of a shame because, particularly like a Steve Bonnet story, if you read the Steve Bonnet chapter of A General History of Pirates, he just kind of comes off as like a buffoon. But at the same time, it is good because you can literally like almost see like a timeline of, he attacked this ship and then he attacked this ship and the captain's name was this. So it really helps out in research wise to track down and find information because it's so detailed.
There is clearly a very great interest in pirates at the time that this book is responding to. And if you look at pictures of Blackbeard and Bonny and Mary Read, Calico Jack, Bartholomew Roberts, these are all the people featuring in this book. So the images of piracy that we have are the people featuring in this book. A lot of the films made in the 1940s and 50s in the kind of golden age of Hollywood, and then again with the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, they are also going back to this text for materials. In terms of setting the legacy of the image of piracy, the general history is undoubtedly the most important. It does emerge from what's going on at the time, though. So a lot of what the author is writing about is drawn from pirate trials. And so I think it kind of reflects the period in many ways. So it's not totally unique in terms of being a popular account of piracy at this time. But what I think the author is anonymous, and this is a huge problem. Some people think it was Daniel Defoe. More likely it was a journalist called Nathaniel Mist. And what they're actually doing is they're writing a satire. So what they're really doing is writing about English politics and the church and gender and all these issues. There's even a review, which may have been written by the author himself, which says that each of the pirates was a satire on a specific person in government, and you could identify who they were supposed to be. Very clear, accessible form. So things like pirate codes, the Jolly Roger, the sort of illustrations of pirates, the clothes, walking the plank, although that's actually about Roman pirates in an opening chapter. It's not about pirates from the 18th century. But a lot of these ideas, the idea of a kind of pirate commonwealth or republic, they are there, but they are kind of distilled in this book in a way that then becomes this enormously influential image that we have ever since.
Okay, why are pirates scary? Because they are!
Thank you for sailing with us.
We hope you enjoyed.
Is it Jack Rackham or John Rackham? This looks normal, right? There's some normal people. Is it recording? Should I go on the voice? Can you actually see me? Should I become a documentary person? Right. What did they do?
Blackbeard. No.
She ran. No, she didn't. She did. Pirate. I looked at the squirrel. Hello?
Mic check. Meow. Meow. Meow.
Are we recording? Is it tracking me? There's a squirrel. I got home. I'm a...
Blackbeard. No. Ah!
I'm fine. I keep forgetting his name.